What are the risks of starting an Airbnb business in 2025? Let me ask you, are you dreaming of launching your Airbnb business? That's great to hear, but I'll warn you, I've seen countless people rush into the short-term rental business model without first understanding the risks that come with it. Within months, and if not weeks, they're forced to walk away empty-handed. I'm James Murphy, and today I have launched over 500 short-term rentals over the past 6 years across 4 continents. Over that period, my business has generated more than $25 million in bookings, and we've hosted hundreds of thousands of guests. So in this video, I'll show you with full transparency the major risks of starting an Airbnb business this year and how to protect yourself against each risk. The first area that we will cover are financial risks. When starting an Airbnb business, different financial risks catch most new hosts by surprise. But here's the good news. Once you know what to look for, these become incredibly simple to mitigate. For a standard 1-bedroom apartment this year, hosts typically invest approximately $7,000 to $12,000, not including security deposit and rent, to create a guest experience that commands premium rates from day one. Let's do the maths on this. A security deposit would be roughly $1,500 to $3,000 approximately. Furnishing and setup costs would be roughly $5,000 to $8,000 plus. Renovations and minor repairs can vary from about $0 to $2,000. Initial supplies, approximately $200 to $500 plus. Licensing and permits can range from $50 to $500 plus, and professional photography from about $200 to $500 plus. And of course, this can vary a lot, and you can certainly reduce these costs by up to $1,500 to $3,500 if you just find the right property from the get-go or get creative. For example, you could explore secondhand shops or online platforms for quality used items. Only take a fully furnished property, which would lead to savings of $5,000 to $8,000. Or leverage a furniture lease to buy service where you pay out the furniture monthly instead of upfront. Additionally, you could provide only the absolute essentials in the beginning instead of luxury items. Another pathway is to fix things that need fixing yourself or to ask family and friends to help you out. At the end of the day, no matter what you do in life, you will encounter challenges. So the key is to learn to come up with solutions every time. Learn from those who have achieved what you want to achieve. One of the ways that you can do this is by joining the right communities where you can access the right people and the right information. Now, the second financial risk comes from the fixed monthly expenses that continue regardless of your booking calendar. You've got to pay that rent whether the guests are staying or not. So what are some of these costs? Well, firstly, you have the obvious, the rent payment, which for a 2-bedroom property would roughly be maybe $1,000 to $2,000. Next up is insurance, which is going to cost approximately $50 to $100. Next up, you have utilities consisting of electricity, gas, water, and that's going to be approximately $100 to $300 a month. Council, local tax, HOA, strata fees, if applicable, these are going to cost anywhere from $100 to $500 a month. And if the property is part of a homeowners association, there can be fixed monthly fees for the maintenance of common areas and amenities. This is normally only when you own the property, so it probably doesn't apply to a rental. The good news is that when you understand how to optimize these costs, they become predictable and manageable. And just know that when you've done your due diligence correctly and your market research appropriately, you're going to be taking on a property that will perform. And when it's managed effectively as an Airbnb, it should achieve 2 to 4 times that of a traditional long-term rent, making those fixed costs look insignificant and easy to pay in the long run. The third financial risk for new Airbnb businesses is actually low profit margins. Because make no mistake, when you don't have a proven strategy, the heightened competition in the market, high guest expectations, and rising cleaning costs can often squeeze your margins to 10% at best, when it should really be closer to 25 to 40% profit margin. That's why inside our community, we go deep into strategies such as combating market saturation by cultivating a niche for your property. That basically means you can stand out from the competition by defining a specific niche or type of traveler you want to attract and tailoring your amenities and listing descriptions to match that niche. Addressing rising cleaning costs through a sustainable and streamlined turnover system. That basically means you provide high quality, easily washable linens and surfaces by placing ample clearly labeled trash and recycling bins in very obvious places. You also want to create a visual checklist for guests of basic tidying expectations upon their departure, exceeding guest expectations with thoughtful, automated, unexpected gifts. For example, leaving a small, locally sourced welcome item or a handwritten note, providing unexpected conveniences like a variety of phone chargers, a small selection of local guidebooks, or clearly labeled simple instructions for everything. Another really powerful gift is providing a branded journal so that they can actually write about some of the memories of their stay. These added elements can get you more new bookings, decrease costs, and get you repeated guests, which combined just means higher profit margins. Now, let me be frank. There's an even bigger risk that can make or break your new Airbnb business. I'm talking about regulatory and legal challenges, and trust me, this is something I've seen catch even experienced hosts completely off guard. So let's review this critical area. Regulatory risks and legal challenges in the Airbnb space is on everybody's lips. In fact, it's probably given far too much attention, but in some ways, it can actually be a positive thing because it scares people away from this business opportunity. And that makes much more room for people like you and I that understand there are ways to make the business work within the regulatory framework, so now we have an opportunity to win. In recent months and in the past few years, major cities have come to terms with the impact of Airbnb on local tourism and have introduced new restrictions for Airbnb hosts. Regulatory risk in the Airbnb space refers to the possibility that local or national governments introduce or change laws and regulations that impact hosts' ability to operate. However, I want to make it clear and repeat myself 3 times on this matter, there is almost always a pathway to operate a legal, compliant, and profitable Airbnb business in spite of regulations in any given area or city. I'll say it again, there's almost always a pathway to operate a legal, compliant, and profitable Airbnb business in spite of any regulations in any given city or area. One more time, there is almost always a pathway to operate a legal, compliant, and profitable Airbnb business in spite of regulations in any given area or city. Did you get it the 3rd time? Okay, back to the regulatory and compliance deep dive. Staying compliant can involve adapting your operations as rules change. Cities often mandate business licenses and tourism board registration for short-term rentals, adding both administrative steps and recurring fees to your operation. These added elements do add administrative steps and those recurring fees that weren't there previously that can, in a small way, impact your expenses. But here's what people miss. These regulations can actually create the perfect conditions for committed hosts to thrive. Regulations often act as a natural filter that reduces competition from amateur or non-compliant listings. It can actually reduce supply as well, and then demand increases, and that's the perfect storm for profitability. And when cities introduce new rules, many casual or part-time hosts who are unwilling or unable to meet these requirements leave the platform. They just don't want to jump through all the red tape and the hoops. So let me show you how you can stay ahead. The truth is that cities follow a predictable pattern. And if you identify these 2 signs, you can see regulations coming months in advance. The first warning sign is what is called the housing squeeze. This is when you see regular long-term apartments disappear while Airbnb listings skyrocket in a neighborhood. When you notice this, know for sure that there's a good chance new regulatory laws are going to come soon. The second sign is that once cities start earning more than 14% of their tourism revenue from Airbnb, they usually roll out special permits and extra fees as a requirement for hosts. But do you know what the good news is about all of this? These signs tell us 2 things. They validate that our listings have a high earning potential since they're in high demand locations, and they acknowledge our business model's economic power and legitimacy. In the long haul, Airbnb isn't going anywhere, and the councils and the local governments are going to have to adjust because of the demand. In other words, these kinds of signs legitimize our venture, moving it from a grey area to a recognized and fundamental part of the local economy. And it's now on us to find the workaround in a legal format to make things work and profit from the opportunity. But now, we're not done yet. When you have listed your first few properties and the guests start coming in, that's when the real risks begin. Guest-related risks and challenges when starting an Airbnb business. Here's a scary truth about Airbnb hosting. Your investment and reputation rest in the hands of strangers, and platforms only verify about 10% of what you need to know about them. The first thing you need to understand here is that it only takes one guess to trigger neighbor complaints that can lead to local bans, and it only takes one guess to go against you, put a 1-star review, make your life difficult, and all of a sudden your listing can tank and your visibility will shrink. And after hosting hundreds of thousands of guests over the past 6 years, we discovered something. The most problematic guests aren't who you'd expect. Let me share a story. In 2020, when we were still green in the business model, we had a guest with perfect reviews book one of our properties. Everything looked great on paper, but something felt off about the way they booked with us. They barely asked questions and they booked last minute. Well, my instincts weren't wrong. The result was a small house party that cost us an extra cleaning fee and a few noise complaints. Not a total disaster, but definitely avoidable. After a few not so great experiences, my team and I have developed a much more effective way to verify guests. We've discovered that the best guests actually follow these specific patterns. They book 7 to 45 days in advance, they ask 1 to 3 specific questions about amenities, and they have authentic 4.7 to 4.9 ratings, not perfect 5s. These patterns, when identified, have helped us mitigate our risk dramatically. I know some people go one extra layer of security deeper when deciding whether guests make it into properties or not. Basic ID verification, AI-powered screening, noise monitoring, which will cost roughly $50 a month, a ring cam on your front door, linking all of these elements to a local security firm, taking a security deposit, ensuring your guests sign terms and conditions, and ensuring that you have a soft copy of their ID that links to their credit check. Anyway, now let's talk about the next risk: competition and market saturation. Did you know that popular tourist destinations have seen their Airbnb listings in many places quadruple since 2023? Cities like Miami, Nashville, and San Diego now have one short-term rental for every 50 residents. In some vacation hotspots, that ratio is closer to 1 in 20. What's really happening is a price war that's hurting hosts who aren't prepared. Now, what's fascinating is actually demand in most of these places is still continuing to outstrip the supply, despite the supply increasing in a huge way, which just shows how many people are turning to Airbnb year in, year out. Big companies with huge amounts of investment behind them are buying entire buildings and then using specialized pricing, computations, and algorithms to set their prices dynamically. I've been in this industry long enough to know that some of these companies will often lose money on purpose for a period of time just to attract guests away from smaller hosts and take over the market by having those lower price points. Yes, competition is tough. For example, there's this one property that generated $4,000 monthly in 2024, but is now struggling to bring in $3,000, while operational costs have increased by 10 to 20% across the board. But of course, not everything is bad news. This intense saturation in the market has actually created the biggest opportunity since Airbnb began for those who know how to differentiate themselves. Take urban markets, for example. The successful properties aren't just offering a place to stay. One operator in Austin transformed a basic 3-bedroom apartment into a music-themed experience with a recording studio. Their average daily rate jumped from $200 to $350 with an 85% occupancy rate. Luxury pet-friendly properties are seeing a 40 to 70% premium price increase as well, and remote work-ready spaces command at least 30% higher rates. One of my clients, Jennifer, in Leeds in the north of England, took on a 2-bedroom penthouse with an outdoor courtyard on the top of the roof. It was a nice apartment, so you would have expected it would achieve maybe £150, which is about $200 a night. What Jennifer did was she turned the outdoor courtyard into a spectacle. She put synthetic grass all over the roof, she put fairy lights everywhere, she put beautiful, nice seating, and then she put a hot tub on top of the roof. Jennifer has since achieved rates up to £500, more than 2.5 times what you'd normally expect for a property like this. Because here's the truth: while amateur operators are being forced out, professionals who understand this shift build sustainable portfolios. They're not just surviving, they're thriving by turning every property into a unique concept. And that's what you want to do too. Now, finding the right niche to differentiate from the competition and get more bookings is great, but there's a risk around the corner that can become a major inconvenience. Technological and platform related risks of starting an Airbnb business. Airbnb constantly updates its search algorithm, which changes how properties appear in search results. This is actually fantastic news for hosts who know how to adapt, but not so fantastic for the rest. I was speaking to a prospective client yesterday and they told me that they only update their Airbnb listings once per year. That is absolute madness. Airbnb's current AI-driven ranking system analyzes over 100 different metrics from response times to pricing, and with that, it has completely changed how it ranks hosts. Nowadays, your visibility heavily depends on your performance. And what if your ratings drop or your bookings slow down? Then you're hit with even lower search rankings, leading to even fewer bookings. The old saying, eyeballs are everything in business. That's a reality, and it's a reality you must learn how to deal with if you want to thrive in this business. Now, understanding these 5 major risks when starting your Airbnb business is crucial. And yes, I've helped hundreds of everyday people build their own 6- and 7-figure short-term rental empires, but I'll never sugarcoat it for you. I'll always show you the full picture so you can make an informed decision. Every single one of these risks can be mitigated, and you can step into this Airbnb opportunity and lift your life to the next level. If you're interested in doing just that, then click this next video. It's a complete guide on how to get started from scratch. I'll see you there.